Hi. I wanted to put in a plug for this book, F. Bruce, The Spreading Flame. It's an early book of Bruce. He wrote dozens of books over the next 30 years. At that point, he was working on a commentary on the book of Acts, which was published, a Greek commentary as well as an English commentary on Acts. I've profited greatly by his work over the years. And in this book, he's doing a brief overview of early church history. It's actually 3 shorter books that were published together. The total is in this volume is about 500 pages, although they're still given their original pagination. So in this particular sampling, I want to look at what he said in the first 2 volumes of the work. On the title page, it says of the book, The Spreading Flame, The Rise and Progress of Christianity. F. Bruce at the time was the head of the Department of Biblical History and Literature at the University of Sheffield. He later taught in my home city of Manchester and went to a Brethren church not very far from where I was born in Stockport, England. The books that are contained here, or combined here, are The Dawn of Christianity, which tells the story of the infant church to the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. The second volume is The Growing Day, from AD 70 to the accession of Constantine in AD 313. And the third volume is Light in the West, Christianity in Rome after Constantine, and it's spread to Britain and the English-speaking world. Now, I'm not saying this is the best book on early church history. It's certainly one of the best I've read. So if you're conservative and you want a primer on early church history, I recommend this for basic library. And for Jehovah's Witnesses, it's a good cure for a lot of what ails you. I'll give you a sampling of what he says about the organization of the early church. One of the points he's emphatic about in this book is that the early church was not uniform. It was diverse, and that is a symptom of the fact that it had no central organization, no hierarchical authority, and it had no governing body. Now, on page 125 of the first volume of the 3, he says this about the Acts 15 passage that we are trained to use if we're from a witness background, which we think proves that there was a governing body, or hierarchical authority in the early church. He says about the letter that Jerusalem church ended up writing at the end of chapter 15. You have the account of it, the text of it. That letter that James and the other elders in Jerusalem sent to the churches that were touched by the circumcision controversy. He says this: it should be observed that there is no suggestion that the mother church, that is the Jerusalem church, had the authority to dictate to the autonomous churches of Antioch and Asia Minor. As Fenton Hort pointed out, you remember Fenton Hort of Westcott and Hort, as Fenton Hort pointed out, no verb of command is used in the letter, although the Greek tongue has a plentiful supply of such words. There is no thought here of a central or metropolitan authority to which the various churches must bow. And then in the second volume, in chapter 5, he says this about the relations between churches. The churches in the first 3 centuries AD were closely linked together in Christian fellowship, but they were not united in any federal organization. There was no idea that the church of one city was subordinate to the church of any other city. The church of Antioch, for example, did not lie within the jurisdiction of the church of Jerusalem, although the mother church naturally enjoyed a special measure of prestige and respect. There was, in those earlier centuries, no suggestion that any one church was subordinate to the aggregate of all the churches. The relationship between the churches was primarily one of fellowship, that is, koinonia, and charity, agape. The churches united by this bond came in the 2nd century to be denoted comprehensively as the Catholic Church, and here he capitalizes, but he doesn't say Roman Catholic Church. That's another misapprehension. The Catholic Church. Where does that come from? He says the first appearance of the expression, that is the word Catholic, does not bear this special sense. It comes in one of Ignatius's letters in the sentence, "Where Jesus Christ is, there is the Catholic Church. Now this would be as early as 105 or 110 AD, so the word was in use. And the word Catholic, of course, means nothing but universal. It has nothing to do with a specific church in one place. And then in the first volume again, I wanted to read you something else, which answers the question that would obviously come up right away if you're thinking of this from a Jehovah's Witness or any other cult setting where you need a centralized authority. Well, if they had no governing body and no organization such as we would recognize, then how were they united? What united them? And Bruce has the answer. Page 65 of Volume 1, he says, right from the beginning then, the apostolic preaching was bound up with the resurrection of Jesus. As it began, so it continued. Whatever differences developed in later days between various groups of Christ's followers, here was something on which they remained united. Peter, the first of the apostles, and James, the brother of Jesus, and Paul, the missionary to the Gentiles, recounting the basic facts of the gospel story, the death, burial, and rising of Jesus, and his resurrection appearances to various people. Paul says, and this is he's quoting here from 1 Corinthians 15, whether therefore it be I or they, that is Peter, James, and the rest, this is what we proclaim, and this is what you believed. Moreover, he went on, and Peter and James and the rest would have agreed with him, if this resurrection claim is untrue, then there is no Christian gospel, no message of hope of salvation. Our faith is the sheerest vanity, and we have sacrificed all for nothing, most wretched of mortals that we are. All of this is, of course, based on 1 Corinthians 15. Bruce says, the truth of Christianity, in fact, is inseparable from the truth of the apostolic assertion that Jesus, the crucified, rose again from the dead. Now, later on, he deals with the special visit that Paul made to Jerusalem with the express purpose of getting to know the apostles and finding out whether their gospel was the same as his own. And Bruce says about that on page 98 of Volume 1, he met none of the other apostles at that time, and it is no accident that, in his famous summary of the appearances of the risen Christ, the only persons whom he mentions by name as being granted such appearances are Peter, James, and himself. Again, he's alluding to 1 Corinthians 15. These interviews with Peter and James were most important for Paul. The main outlines of the apostolic message as it had been proclaimed from the day of Pentecost onward were made clear to him, so that he could thenceforth assure his hearers and readers that he was imparting to them what had been imparted to himself in the first instance. Whether it be I or they, that is the original witnesses of the resurrection, this is what we proclaim. There were not two or more divergent accounts of the good news circulating in the apostolic age, but one and the same account, whether propagated by Paul, Peter, James, or anyone else. Whatever differences might or might not arise later between Paul and the others, they were agreed about the basic facts which constituted the gospel. So Bruce has put his finger on exactly what it was that united the early church in their testimony. The gospel was very simple. It was about facts. It was not about theology. Theology is built from facts, of course, but the facts of the gospel, as detailed in 1 Corinthians 15, very simply, and in the Apostles' Creed 300 years later, the facts are pretty simple to comprehend, so simple that a child can comprehend them. A man died for our sins, was buried, and rose again on the third day. This was witnessed to. So the witness of the church, and even the martyrdoms of the church, because the word martyr comes from the word witness in Greek, the martyrdoms of the church were on behalf of this gospel. So what united the church? Something that they had in common was the testimony, and it was the apostolic testimony. Even though the apostles themselves is plain as day, if you just read Corinthians and Galatians, the apostles had differences. Acts 15 shows that the apostles had serious differences in some respects about what should be practiced, what should be Christian practice, and what should not. But they were all united in this, that Jesus Christ was the gospel, and the facts about his life constituted that earliest testimony, and continued to be that which centered, focused, and united the church for 3 centuries before there was felt to be any need for creeds and any need for hierarchy. I'll put in a link to JW Good News, that is Jehovah's Witnesses Good News, versus the Gospel of the Apostles, which is our discussion of 1 Corinthians 15. Also the playlist, Doubt, Unbelief, and Christian Apologetics. See you soon.